Following the final battle between Yhwach vs Uryu, Aizen, Ichigo and Renji, we ended up having an abrupt 10-year time skip in the following chapter 685. We had witnessed how the Serite has been rebuilding, how Mayuri has created the next iteration of Nemu, and more importantly, Rukia has finally become a captain, with her being assigned to lead the 13th division. Interestingly enough, the final chapter of Bleach reveals that Rukia and Renji ended up having a daughter together who is called Ichika Abarai. Overall, the epilogue of Bleach was a really heartwarming way to wrap things up on. However, for fans of the series who may not have read the light novels, everything does feel a little bit too rushed, as Kubo had only tied together a few of the loose ends, leaving some plot points unanswered. And on top of all of this, how were we supposed to digest the fact that all of a sudden Rukia and Renji were starting a family together? In this video, I'm going to resolve this problem by breaking down and analysing the very overlooked light novel We Do Not Always Love You. This light novel was never translated into English, despite it revealing important events that had taken place during that 10-year time skip before the epilogue of the manga. This light novel is focused on the marriage of Rukia and Renji. We Do Not Always Love You is a light novel that is set 2.5 years after Can't Be Your Own World, and it is 3 years after the end of the 1000-year Blood War arc. It was written by Makoto Matsubara and Tite Kubo. A lot of time has gone into researching for this video, so make sure you stick around until the very end, because I will be analysing the trajectory of Rukia and Renji's relationship, as well as discussing the complicated history behind these two characters. And additionally, I'll be talking about the characterization of Byakuya, who honestly plays an excellent loving older brother role within the light novel. So without further delay, here is my complete breakdown and analysis of the We Do Not Always Love You light novel. To kick things off, let's discuss the title of the light novel. On Kubo's official fan club, Club Outside, in question 386, Kubo was asked who had come up with the title for We Do Not Always Love You. His response to the question reveals that he was the one who was responsible for the title. We Do Not Always Love You is a clever play on words that highlights the key event that takes place. The words we do is a foil of the phrase I do, which is of course spoken by a bride and a groom at the end of their marriage ceremony. The not is used to indicate the binding of two people through vows. The light novels also have a very intriguing cover which features Rukia in a bridal veil. This is contrasted against the bright and vibrant art that Kubo often draws on the cover of his manga volumes. This drawing of Rukia instead is shaded very softly. From the way that he has drawn Rukia indicates that this is a light and almost ethereal moment in her life. In question 28 on Club Outside, Kubo was asked yet another question regarding information from the light novels. This fan had wondered if the contents and lore of the light novels was largely decided by him. Kubo responded by saying that he had come up with and shared the contents and lore with the two writers Makoto Matsubara and Ryogo Narita, but in terms of how they portray what Kubo had told them was left up to them. Furthermore, in another question and answer session in question 276, a fan had noticed that when Rukia had entered into the family register, she had decided not to change her last name, which of course results in two Captain Kuchikis being around. The fan had wondered if Rukia was going to change her last name to Abarai. Kubo responded by saying that many different Shinigami differentiate between Byakuya and Rukia by referring to Byakuya as Captain Kuchiki and Rukia as 13th Captain Kuchiki. From the manga, we are aware that Rukia and Renji have a shared backstory. Within chapter 98, after Renji loses his fight against Ichigo, Kubo inserts a flashback about both Rukia and Renji, revealing that they grew up together in South Rukongai's 78th district called Inuzuri. This literally translates to hanging dog. The name of this district is also a subtle reference to Renji. In Rukongai, each of the 4 quarters is divided into 80 districts. While District 1 was the safest, District 78, where Rukia and Renji lived, was considered to be one of the worst. From Renji's reflections about their time together, it is clear that he had held Rukia in high regard, even though they were all district scum. Renji and Rukia both decided to become Shinigami in order to live within the Serite and to secure a better life for themselves after their friends had passed away. However, once they had risen through the ranks of the Shinigami Academy, Rukia was found and quickly adopted by Byakuya Kuchiki into the prestigious Kuchiki family. This had instantly transformed Rukia into a noble woman. Renji's romantic feelings for Rukia are never explicitly shown to us throughout the manga, but in this chapter they are hinted at us through his tone of voice. On the surface, he was celebrating Rukia's acceptance into the Kuchiki family, as he was telling her that this was something that they had both craved for since they were children. However, deep down, just like a stray dog, Renji was beginning to realize that his status was too lowly for the pedigree of woman that Rukia has now become. Renji's inferiority was amplified and directed towards the nobility of Byakuya Kuchiki, someone who he could never hope to be an equal to. Renji's happiness when he was congratulating Rukia was like a veil that had carefully concealed his feelings of worthlessness. His reaction had even made Rukia feel upset, because I think deep down she had wanted him to tell her to decline the offer, but Renji, selflessly knowing that this would secure Rukia's future, had pushed her away by convincing her that joining the Kuchiki family was the right decision. During the Soul Society arc, his pleas to Ichigo to save Rukia's life revealed the depth of the emotion that was hidden underneath Renji's wild and aggressive demeanor. As the manga continues, the bond between Renji and Rukia is strengthened as they fight together, train together, and importantly overcome the different obstacles that they are presented with. I do have a lot of videos on my channel where I delve deep into the backstory of Rukia and Renji. Check out my character analysis for each of them where I delve into their backstory through each of their perspectives. Now, delving into the We Do Not Always Love You light novel, we begin by talking about the central theme of this story. This is something that is highlighted by Captain Hitsugaya during Rukia's wedding announcement, and this theme is the road to restoration. Hitsugaya thinks to himself that though the wreckage of the recent war with the Quincy is still spread far and wide, there will be a glimmer of hope for everyone after they witness the union of Renji and Rukia. In addition to exploring the theme of hope and restoration, We Do Not Always Love You is characterized by an abundance of witty dialogue and uplifting interactions amongst characters. There is no major antagonist in this story, which means that there is a lot of time for slice of life moments, which honestly I really enjoy reading about, and it's a nice break from all of the constant battles and fights that we get. Now, there are some sections of the light novel which focus on the members of the Gotei 13, like Seijin Komomura and the newly appointed Captain Isane Kotetsu. These serve as nice B stories to the main A plot, which is all about Rukia and Renji. Now, the two of them need to go through all of the paperwork for their marriage registration, and then they need to make the wedding announcement and finally settle down to enjoy this ceremony. Things are complicated by the fact that Rukia is a noble, so there is a lot more paperwork than is ordinarily involved. Luckily, Byakuya is more than willing to do his part to help Rukia enter into this new stage of her life. More of the story unfolds within the Serete, with glimpses into the elite hotspots such as expensive formal restaurants and exclusive mansions. These locations are only accessible to noble families like the Kuchiki family. Through all of this, we learn more about the world building of the Soul Society, as it gives us an insight into the bureaucratic procedures that must be followed when noble members decide to marry non-nobles. A lot of the marriage formalities that we see are intertwined with Japanese culture and traditions, and looking at it through the lens of modern Western civilization, it can be a bit confusing, but it's important to go through all of the key events that are about to unfold for the marriage of Rukia and Renji in order to really appreciate the significance of their marriage. The informal announcement of Rukia and Renji's marriage takes place within the 6th sector of the Serete at a fancy traditional Japanese restaurant called the Safflower. The guests at this venue include 1 captain, 8 vice captains, and 2 third seats. Those present at the time included Hitsugaya, Kiyone, Hanataro, Momo, Rangiku, Kira, Yumichika, and lastly Hisagi. The scene opens up with Kiyone and Hanataro rushing to the venue. We are given a description for the very fancy setting of this announcement. The restaurant is located in a high-end area called Kiko Kugai, translating to Noble City. Once Kiyone and Hanataro arrive, the two of them are immediately greeted by Rukia and Renji, as they are also accompanied by a lot of familiar faces. The light-hearted, wholesome tone of this scene is maintained through a lot of cheerful banter amongst all of the characters, but this is comically contrasted by the tense aura that arrives before Rukia and Renji are about to make that announcement. It's honestly an amazing slice of life scene, as we get to see the Shinigami worry about everyday things like expensive restaurants and clothes, and taking time off to drink and party. And during all of this, they even have time to reminisce about the events of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. There is a lot of self-aware humor here, and even the whole Hisagi taking notes about what he is going to write about in the Serite Bulletin is really fun to read about. I mean, moments like that just bring to life a lot of the tidbits that we learn about characters like Hisagi from the character data books. Yeah, we are aware that he writes the Serite Bulletin, but we haven't seen him act as a journalist outside of some anime filler scenes. It's a nice opportunity to see the unique personalities of each of the characters. Similar to the manga, we see that Hinataro is shy and that Rangiku is a shopaholic, but we also learn some new details with Hisagi having spent all of his money, which may highlight that he is bad with his money management or he isn't paid enough to be going to such fancy restaurants, as Rangiku picks up on this by asking if he will ever mature and reach his widely celebrated Daiguren Hyorin Maru Handsome Edition. When Rukia and Renji eventually make that announcement, it appears as though nobody is shocked, as Rangiku reveals that she suspected that they would announce something like this, especially because the restaurant that they visit is very fancy. It is an all-round incredibly touching scene as congratulations are passed around. I'm really delighted to especially see how far Rukia has come, as she is drawing on her family connections in order to help her to prepare for the wedding. She comments that she has left the planning for this announcement to Chiyo. Chiyo is a maid who usually performs miscellaneous chores around Rukia, as she is the youngest employee working for the Kuchiki family, and it's evident that Rukia is the most comfortable with her. I love how they eventually find out that Byakuya had covered the bill for the restaurant visit too, as this serves two purposes. Not only is Byakuya very quickly characterized as a compassionate and generous older brother here, but his actions highlight the class divide that exists between the lives of the Shinigami within the Serete. Byakuya covered the bill so that Rukia and Renji's guests will not probably have to fork out their entire month's salary just on a single meal. We also get a flashback here where Rukia and Renji had privately approached Byakuya about their intentions to get married. In his usual stoic demeanor, he didn't say much about their engagement. So this understandably made both Rukia and Renji worried whether if they had his blessing or not, but after they had realized that Byakuya had paid for the bill for their restaurant visit, their worries were quickly dashed away. We learned that prior to the 1000-year Blood War arc, it was a part of everyday life that the Shinigami from each squad would gather and drink sake together after work. But currently, every single squad member is busy with reconstruction efforts following the war, so it's extremely rare to come across any drinking parties even within members of the same division. So for this reason, Rukia and Renji were deeply grateful for everybody who turned up for their big announcement. So after debating about it for quite some time, Rukia and Renji finally decide that they will hold a wedding ceremony after all. So the process of registering their marriage begins at the Kuchiki family mansion in the morning, about 1 week after they had announced that they were getting married to their friends. Rukia meets Byakuya as he is finishing some preparations, as she lets him know that they will be leaving for the Nuseki formalities. The Nuseki refers to the action of entering a family register as a married couple. Surprisingly, Byakuya shows so much love and affection for Rukia as he gazes at her with soft eyes. He asks her if the appointment for beginning her marriage registration has been confirmed. This subtly highlights that Byakuya really does care and he's doing everything in his power to help Rukia out in regards to her wedding preparation. Byakuya then summons their family servant Chiyo in order to explain to Rukia about the process of Kininkai. Like I mentioned earlier, Chiyo is an important character who reappears several times throughout this light novel. Through her, we get exposition as to the procedures of the noble families and all of the different steps that noble people have to take in order to get married, with there being several additional steps and it just being an overall long-winded process which both Rukia and Renji have to adjust to, as neither of them were born as nobles, so they don't know much about all of this. Chiyo explains to Rukia and Renji that the Kininkai means Golden Seal Noble Assembly. In cases of marriages involving the 4 noble families, it is compulsory to submit a document to the Golden Seal Noble Assembly, and that document should be presented by the head of the family themselves. Renji and Rukia decide to begin the process by visiting the Personnel Record Administration Bureau. This bureau is notorious for its long waiting times. Once the two of them receive a number ticket at the reception desk, instead of sitting there and waiting, they decide to visit the Squad 7 barracks. Here they run into Seijin Komomura's nephews, who are wolf children named Uruai and Shoma. Tetsuzaimon Iba, who is now the captain of the 7th Division, comes out to congratulate both Rukia and Renji. After realizing that they are under the long waiting times of the Personnel Bureau, it seems as though Iba made some arrangements to help speed things along. This makes Rukia reflect on the fact that Captain Iba has become softer now. This is most likely because of him raising Komomura's nephews. We then shift scenes to the 6th Division squad barracks as we learn about the living arrangements for captains and vice captains. As Renji prepares to leave his life as a bachelor, officially seated members who are 9th seat or above are given private rooms within the squad barracks. Most people go to sleep and wake up there. However, people wishing to live outside of the squad barracks are given a class of housing appropriate to their station. No more than one room of a housing complex is rented out to those up to the 3rd seat. But in terms of captains and lieutenants, they are provided with detached housing large enough to be called mansions. Until now, Renji was living at the squad barracks and Rukia was based at the Kuchiki mansion. After the two of them get married, we learn about how they will move into a mansion together that is built in the central 1st sector of the Serete. It seems like Rukia and Renji are rushing from one administration bureau to another, submitting documents, and then waiting for another reception counter for the next bureau to open up. So while they were waiting for the reception counter of the Noble Assembly to open up, Renji ended up being accompanied by Rukia in order to pack his things up at his private quarters. Renji's room is an absolute mess when Rukia walks in, and there is a futon which was laid out in the center of the room with clothes and books scattered everywhere. There is even a soccer ball in his room with some gym equipment too. They then receive a gift from Urahara that was delivered by Ryunosuke and the 3rd seat of the 6th Division Yuki. This very convenient gift is called a Tenikui Warp Assister. This gift allows them to move their belongings from their current living quarters into their new home within an instant. Now this was made using the technology of the Tenkai Ketchu, which if you remember back to the fake Karakura Town arc is the device that Urahara had created in order to swap out the real Karakura Town with a fake replica using 4 giant pillars. Rukia hesitates to accept this gift on the basis of previous commands given by Yamamoto, which presumably were that teleportation or warping devices are forbidden. However, she remembers that Vice Captain Omaida had also paid Mayuri a great deal of money, making it possible for him to warp between his home and his squad barracks. Additionally, the Shinigami Women's Association had also used a warp device that was installed by Nemu in order to take them to their hideout. Rukia also realizes that Urahara has helped them countless times. No matter how desperate the situation was, he always devised countermeasures and had managed to show them the path forward. Rukia's heart overflowed with gratitude for Urahara. Here, he is basically characterized as a war hero. For the Shinigami who never actually had encountered Urahara, their knowledge of his remarkable feats comes from the Serete communication, and there are many people who see him as a hero. It feels good that Urahara is finally getting the recognition that he deserves, especially after he was exiled for a crime that he didn't commit over 100 years ago. So once both Rukia and Renji settle down to have dinner at the Kuchiki family mansion, it is time for Renji to pick out some wedding clothes. Given his station compared to the nobles, it was decided that he should have some new outfits. Rukia thinks about how she will miss eating at this place, but Byakuya assures her that she can visit anytime that she wants. So Renji stands before some sliding screens as 2 servants immediately draw back the panels as we see 5 pieces of traditional Japanese formal wear for men appear. It's evident that these clothes are way too fancy for what Renji is used to. After all, these are the standards of the noble Kuchiki family. We then get a description of the clothing that Renji is going to wear. So attached to the black fabric there were crests which were dyed in white, and they represent the 6th Division squad flower, the camellia. Since Renji does not have a family crest of his own, the servants deemed it appropriate to use the 6th Division's camellia flower as a decoration on his attire. This is honestly a really nice touch, and it makes you realize that noble families like the Kuchiki or Shihoin family usually marry into other noble families, and for Renji and Rukia to get married is kind of out of the norm, so it's nice to see everybody so accommodating and understanding of the circumstances, and to make these small adjustments like this in order to make things easier for Rukia and Renji. So Rukia and the others finally arrive with the required documents at the window of the reception desk for the Golden Seal Noble Assembly. One of the officials, who appeared to have been contacted already, greeted them with a respectful bow. Once Byakuya is done formalizing all of the documents, Rukia and Renji will then receive their marriage certificates. Rukia decides that she does not want to change her last name, as Byakuya tells them that they can announce their marriage at the next captain's meeting in front of everybody. At the captain's meeting, Renji announces that they have completed their new Seki, and they state that they will be both continuing to proceed with their current professional duties, but now as a married couple. When Shunsui congratulates them and releases the confetti, he is taken aback by the fact that none of the other captains or lieutenants were surprised by the announcement. While Soifon appears to be indifferent, like she couldn't care less, Shinji on the other hand reveals that he had heard about their marriage from Momo. Mayuri then cheekily states that he knows all about the gift that the couple had received from Urahara, as he then casts a glare in their direction as the two of them then break out into a cold sweat and swiftly avert avert their eyes away from him. When asked about the marriage ceremony, it is revealed that Byakuya had taken over all of the formalities in order to have the ceremony happen as soon as possible. Despite not really being that emotive, it is evident that Byakuya wants Rukia to have the best day of her life on her wedding day. It had taken as far as 2 months for the new Seki with his late wife Hisana to be accepted, and back then members of the Gotei 13 also had fewer days off compared to now. Byakuya comments on how the two of them were quite oblivious on all of the necessary ceremony arrangements that needed to take place, which also explains why he had to take charge in this department. Renji and Rukia are at a loss for words because he is right, neither of them know really all of the formalities. All of this makes Shunsui laugh as the captain commander decides that he will change the work hours so that everyone will be able to attend the ceremony of Rukia and Renji. So we learn that for the ceremony day, the working hours for all of the Shinigami will wrap up 2 hours earlier. He does this as he understands that there are a lot of Shinigami who would love to attend their wedding. Rukia and Renji make a visit to the human world in order to announce their engagement. They meet up with Orihime at Sakurabashi Park in Karakura Town, and now that the scene has shifted to the human world, we get an update about everything that is happening with our main characters. Orihime currently works as a regular employee for a bread and cake shop called AB Cookies. After her older brother Inoue Sora had passed away, she was getting along by receiving assistance with her living expenses from a distant relative, but this relative had originally agreed that they would only provide financial assistance up until she had graduated from high school, and ever since her graduation 3 years ago, Orihime has been searching for a job placement, and during that time she was working at the shop part-time, but when the shop manager had learnt about her situation, they had insisted that Orihime be a full-time employee working for the company. So Orihime senses something different about Rukia and Renji, as she timidly asks the two of them if they have started dating. Much to her surprise, Rukia reveals that they are already engaged. This makes Orihime overwhelmed with emotions, and she can barely suppress her tears, as Rukia surprises her further by asking Orihime if she will be her lady of honor since she considers her to be her best friend. Rukia then tells Orihime that she is the first person to learn about the good news, as they haven't even announced it to Ichigo, Chad, and the others in the world of the living yet. Orihime rushes and places a phone call to Rukia, but she is currently working as a designer in the apparel department of an enterprise that is managed by Yukio, another Fullbringer, and Jackie also works at the same business, but she is constantly flying all over the world because she is engaged in work concerning the aid of developing countries. Therefore, she is almost never seen in Karakura Town. Orihime is calling Rukia about a handmade gift that she wants to give to Rukia. Orihime imagines Rukia wearing a traditional Japanese white kimono for her bridal outfit. However, Rukia points out the fact that Rukia is a noble woman who probably already has everything prepared to the highest of quality. Orihime then thinks that Rukia could wear a wataboshi, which is a traditional bridal hood-like headdress. However, Orihime realizes that the people who would be assembled there would more fully enjoy and appreciate Rukia's beauty if she could be seen through a veil that was completely transparent rather than a wataboshi, which would cover a lot of her head. Orihime then decides to create a veil for Rukia, even deciding to add some embroidery on it herself. Rukia states that she will write down a set of instructions and send it together with the materials first thing in the morning for her. The scene then shifts to Ichigo just finishing his afternoon classes and arriving home. He finds all of his friends and family gathered at his home with Chad, Uryu, Orihime, Yuzu, Karin, Keigo, and Mizuhiro, and lastly Ishin, as Ichigo enters the room and sees that they are all seated in a circle on cushions that are laid out on the floor, and they all look over at Ichigo at the same time. Spread out in the middle of the room is a wedding veil that they are all in the process of making. We get some exposition which reveals that 1 week ago, Ichigo received a message from Orihime on his phone. She appears to have made a messaging group and had sent everybody a message detailing the wedding gift that she had wanted to give to Rukia and Renji, asking if everyone could come and help her to add the embroidery to the veil. Orihime compared and adjusted everybody's schedules, and Ichigo offered that they use his home as the location for where the embroidery would be added. By the time that Ichigo arrives, they're almost finished embroidering Rukia's wedding veil, as Orihime states that she went to the Soul Society so that everybody could chip in and help to make it. She also visited Urahara's shop where Urahara, Tessai, Ururu, and Jinta had also helped out. And then the day before yesterday, she had even gone to Kukakushiba's residence. Ganju even did a bit of embroidering himself, and Yoriichi had eventually arrived, saying that she had heard about what Orihime was doing from Urahara, and she had then then carried Orihime on her back, shampooing all around the serete, which allowed Orihime to get a lot of people that she had known to do some embroidery on the veil too. Uryu is skeptical about whether or not if Byakuya actually tried to embroider, but Orihime states that he watched while his servant Seikei had volunteered to embroider in his place. The comical reason why he did this was because Byakuya is apparently a nobleman and should not be seen doing embroidery. A lot of the embroidery features symbolism in the form of flowers. Several different flowers have been added to the veil, which represent the Japanese language of flowers, with some of the flowers representing the term happy family and others representing respect and love. Orihime had decided on both of these two terms as they are an excellent motif for a bride to represent on a wedding day. We also get the reveal that after the 1000-year Blood War arc, Uryu is now enrolled as a medical student and Chad is the sparring partner of the heavyweight champion of Japan. Finally, the day of the wedding arrives as many Shinigami have gathered as they stand alongside both sides of the path that is extending out from the shrine, leading all the way up to the gate of the shrine. Whilst some Shinigami came rushing in their usual Shinigami Shihakusho, others had wore their hair up and were dressed in beautiful kimonos. Because there is no real overarching deity in the Soul Society, religious shrines or temples do not exist within the Serete, so many people revere the Soul King as a god instead, when in actuality he is just a king and not really a god. In Rukongai, several temples have been built in order to enshrine the gods and Buddhas that the residents had worshipped during their lifetime, so they had carried forward their religious beliefs into the Soul Society, and it seems as though the Kuchiki family have built a shrine in front of a mausoleum which is dedicated to the spirit of their ancestors. It is used as a venue for rituals and ceremonies. Everything from family meetings to wedding celebrations and funerals, any and all Kuchiki family events are held within this shrine. Orihime begins to worry whether or not her attire is too out of place for the occasion. However, Uryu reassures her, stating that he had heard from Hisagi that it seems like only those from very well-born families end up holding ceremonies within the Serete. Typically for a wedding, people will just invite their close family and friends for a celebratory banquet after registering the marriage, and in general, in the Soul Society, ceremony proceedings and customs differ from family to family. So overall, there isn't really any set rules for how to do things. When Renji finally makes his appearance, he appears to be wearing black traditional Japanese formal wear for men. The elderly head priest guides Renji in time with the elegantly tuned music. After proceeding down the path, taking one step at a time, Renji stopped before the stairs leading up to the shrine. The priest prompts him as he turns to face the gate, as bells begin to ring out and the shrine maiden calls out for the head of the family and the bride. Byakuya Kuchiki then appears before the open gate, dressed in greyish blue coloured formal wear. He is also holding up a red umbrella as Rukia steps out of the palanquin that she was carried here on. As she makes her first appearance, the entire crowd that is gathered rises up in cheers as she is wearing a white bridal kimono made from a pure white material. The fabric is described as though it was emitting light, and on her head she was wearing her wedding veil that was gifted by Orihime. The veil is light and gentle as it matches Rukia's movements, with the golden embroidery on the veil sparkling as it reflects the setting sun in the distance. Rukia then slips under the red umbrella that Byakuya is holding up as the two then start to walk side by side on the path that is approaching the shrine. The priest then begins to recite a ritual that includes announcing the marriage at the shrine, as he then begins to shower prayers and blessings upon the couple. When the couple are united, they partake in a Sansan Kudo, which involves exchanging ceremonial sake cups 3 times with 3 different cups as they take 3 sips from each of the cups. This act concludes all of the marriage rituals. After the ceremony concludes, a banquet is held at Renji's favorite bar and eatery known as Daruma Bar. It is quite close to the Kuchiki family's ceremonial shrine. This time around, it was Renji who decided to conduct the arrangements for the restaurant, as Rangiku cheekily complains about wanting to go back and dine at the high-class restaurant which Byakuya had paid for when Renji and Rukia had first announced their marriage to her. So at this point, the most notable aspect of the celebrations is the gift giving that we see happening. Now, another key highlight of the banquet is Rukia meeting with Shunsui. As she sits down on one of the benches in front of the bar, Shunsui sits down next to her as he hands her a sizable package wrapped in a furoshiki cloth. When Rukia opens the gift, she is shocked to see something which belonged to Ukitake. It is the captain's cloak for Squad 13. Shunsui states that before Ukitake performed the Kamikake ritual during the 1000 7-year Blood War arc, he had handed over his captain's cloak and had instructed Shunsui to appoint Rukia as the next captain in his place. Rukia is visibly shocked by the mere thought of assuming such heavy responsibility. Despite this, she is incredibly grateful that Ukitake had left this behind for her. Shunsui then reveals that the cloak was originally tailored for Kain Shiba. He narrates a former meeting that he had had with Ukitake. In the past, Ukitake was planning to retire and hand over his role as captain to Kain Shiba. Unfortunately, 4 days after they had discussed this, Kain was murdered by the hollow Metastasia before Ukitake's very eyes. Ever since Rukia had become the acting captain of her division, she had assumed that her workload was going to increase exponentially. This is also considering the fact that Kiyone had been transferred to the 4th division, which means more work would fall on the captain to do. But surprisingly, Rukia's workload had barely changed. We learned that this is because the Shinigami who are in the 13th division over the years had figured out ways to decrease the workload for Captain Ukitake, so that there was less of a burden on him since he was sick. Shunsui then surprises Rukia by handing over an envelope full of cash in order to congratulate her on her marriage. The envelope is so thick you can actually feel the weight of the banknotes that are inside of it. Of course, Rukia is shocked by this very generous gift as she tries to return it. However, Shunsui insists that she take it as a gift from both him and Ukitake. And before she even has a chance to argue back, Shunsui disappears using Shumpo. Now that she is on her own, Rukia wraps up the captain's cloak of a former captain as she makes a solemn vow to Ukitake that she will not fail in her duties as the new captain of the 13th division. 4 hours after the start of the wedding banquet, the guests begin to leave as Uryu, Chad, Ichigo and Orihime take this chance to hand over their celebratory gifts to Renji and Rukia. These gifts are mostly envelopes containing cash from the human world. Rukia is surprised to see a gift from Isshin as Ichigo tells her that Isshin felt a lot of regret after he had heard about Kain's death as he was unable to do anything to cheer Rukia up. This is his way of telling her to be as happy as possible from now on, and we finally get confirmation here that Isshin is in fact Kain Shiba's uncle. Isshin was the captain of the 10th division around the time of Kain's death, and he had heard from Ukitake about the details and circumstances which had led to the death of his nephew. Isshin thought that Rukia needed a helping hand, so he would often try to visit the 13th division many times, but whenever he had seen her saddened face from afar, he found it impossible to call out to her and speak to her. Towards the end of the We Do Not Always Love You light novels, in a very brief exchange, Renji encourages Ichigo to ask Orihime out as well. He does this by saying to him, "Don't keep a nice girl waiting." This embarrasses Ichigo, as Renji as the perfect wingman separates Uryu and Chad from Orihime, telling her that they're going to have a conversation between men, which leaves Orihime alone with Ichigo. Ichigo is really nervous here to speak his mind and to confess his feelings for her, so they only really end up talking about Rukia and Renji's wedding ceremony. But later, before they pass through the Sankaimon to leave the Soul Society, Ichigo finally gathers up enough courage in order to ask Orihime to make some time for him later so that they can talk about something, which is implied to be a discussion of Ichigo confessing his feelings for her. I've honestly really enjoyed reading this We Do Not Always Love You light novel. As with everything, there are fans who really enjoyed this light novel and some who didn't, and while I don't want to go into the shipping wars that happened, I will say this, that anybody who thinks that Kubo did not develop the relationship between Renji and Rukia for them to later get married and have a child together, I honestly don't think that they were paying attention to the story and instead were clouded by their own bias, which made them selectively ignore all of the subtle hints that Kubo had weaved into this story about the relationship between Renji and Rukia. Like I mentioned at the very start of the video, I highly recommend that you check out my character analysis for both Rukia and Renji so that you get each of their perspectives towards their backstory and how they felt during specific points in time, which hinted at them being more than just friends, which is told perfectly through how Renji understands the importance of his feelings for Rukia as he tries his best throughout the series to regain his relationship with her after having neglected it following Rukia's adoption into the Kuchiki family. Another important video that I recommend that you check out is the one that I've done on the relationship between Byakuya and Rukia. I think that their character growth and journey is one of the most incredible in all of Bleach, and seeing how Byakuya went from being cold and indifferent towards Rukia to being proud and very accepting of her is so rewarding to see unfold within the manga, and it makes a lot of Byakuya's moments within the We Do Not Always Love You light novel even more impactful. I've honestly had a blast diving into the marriage of Renji and Rukia, and we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. I know that this light novel in particular is not not really discussed much because it isn't translated officially into English. But this is honestly some incredible material that helps to bridge together the 1000-year Blood War arc ending to the epilogue of the manga. It ties together a lot of loose ends, and it honestly gives us an incredible slice of life story, helping us to better understand and relate to Kubo's characters. Hopefully some of this is adapted into the final core of the 1000-year Blood War arc anime. I'd honestly really love to see that, or even as a standalone anime OVA, that would be incredible. So let me know your thoughts about this light novel. What do you think about the marriage ceremony of Rukia and Renji? Were you aware of the events of this light novel? Was there anything from the We Do Not Always Love You light novel that I've forgotten to mention? Definitely continue the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.